people who've never done crowdfunding who has something crowdfundable. There's a contract, like we don't have an office or payroll. In Munich, half-time. A person in Berlin, half-time. Lives in Efrat. I don't know, there's something great about just there. There's going to be too many, yes. That's not, thank you. The only downside about that job is like, you don't feel like
who helps me, we help each other do all of this. Just a little more about Startup Grind. We're powered by Google for Entrepreneurs. We're located in 100 cities, 45 countries, and we've reached out to about 75,000 entrepreneurs since it launched in Silicon Valley. The format for the Startup Grind events are usually 3 hours, 5 to 6 networking, and then 6 to 7 fireside chat with Liz and I, and then we're of course going to open it up to Q&A, and then it will be followed by more networking from about 7 to 8, and anyone who wants to pull Liz to the side and ask questions, they can. So I think that's about it.
And I'm Liz at Indiegogo.com, so you can email me, reach out to me, Global Liz. Reach out. I'm 457 emails behind in my inbox, so do not feel pressure. If I have not returned your email, it's not you, it is me.
Okay. Thank you, Liz. I wanted to start off, if you could please just tell us a little about yourself in terms of your upbringing, your education, your values, your climb up Mount Kilimanjaro, the Himalayan mountains, and maybe even your first experience in entrepreneurship as a child.
Sure. Okay. So, my name is Liz. I grew up in Newton, Massachusetts, which is a, nice suburb not too far from Boston, Massachusetts. And I was adopted when I was 20 days old. And my parents told me when I was about 4, so it's like I've known my whole life. And my birth father was Persian, from what I know. I don't know too much, but and so I mention this because I was adopted when I was a little baby, but I had 2 brothers that were 10 and 11 already. So when I was very, very little, I didn't know which is the father and which is the brothers. There's all these big ones up there. And I became, didn't want to fall behind the big brothers. So they were very into sports, and so I was either going to learn to play the game or I was going to be the ball of the game. So I learned very quickly to play a lot of sports and be very active and be very outgoing. And I think that always playing with the boys and everything made me very confident and, somebody who was up for a lot of challenges, and I was the first girl to play in my Little League baseball team of all boys in the city and the whole thing. So I've always had this, you should go and try things and go forward, and you guys are so far behind. Come up a little closer. It's
George, we're not gonna,
yeah.
Please, George.
Anyway, so, see, I'm very comfortable and tell people.
And they're like, no, we're still comfortable.
Anyway, so when I was young, my dad had a bunch of different kinds of jobs all the time, and for a long time he was basically a sales rep in the pet food industry. And my mom and dad had always raised dogs. If you've seen the movie Best in Show, this was my family. It was taking the dogs and parading around the thing. It was hilarious, right? So my dad was in this industry, and we used to go on the weekends, and I would go with my dad when I was 8, 10 years old, and we would pack everything up in the big station wagon, and we would drive to Connecticut or Pennsylvania or New Jersey or wherever it was where the dog show was. We would set up this booth, and people would come, and my 8-year-old self would be like, does your dog want to try this treat or whatever? So this was kind of my very first exposure to, it wasn't my dad's business, but he was the sales rep for the region and kind of getting the word out, all that kind of thing. So that was my first real experience with, I guess, being a mini entrepreneur. And I went to an all-girls high school called Dana Hall School in Wellesley, Massachusetts, after going to the public grade school, because the junior high wasn't really great, and I was just supposed to go there for 2 years, then go back to the public high school, but I started playing on all the sports teams and doing everything, so I stayed at Dana Hall, and then I went to Harvard for college, probably heard of it, in Boston area as well. So, when I got out of Harvard, it was kind of funny because people were like getting jobs in banking and consulting, and I was like, I don't even really know what that is. It wasn't really my thing. So I got a job selling Gallo wine to restaurants, like random job, in New Hampshire. And my brother lived in Portland, Oregon. And Portland is right next to Beaverton, Oregon, which is the headquarters of Nike.
Okay.
And so he saw this ad in the paper one day that Nike was starting a management training program. And it was like, if you like sports and you're an outgoing person and your name is Liz, you should apply. It was like, so I was going out there to visit him for Thanksgiving anyway. And the day after Thanksgiving, shopping in America is like the biggest shopping day of the year. I had no idea. I walk into the Nike store, I'm like, I would like this job. She's like, it's the biggest day of the year. I'm like, I know, but I'm here today. Can we just talk about this stuff? So anyway, this woman ended up getting me into the program and love it.
Okay, great. I wanted to, before we go into Indiegogo, I just wanted to ask first about your career in terms of building and selling the consulting firm. You were there for 10 years?
No. I think that I was only there for 4 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I can give you the story.
Or if you could tell us a little more about your experience there.
Sure. So after Nike, I went to business school at Kellogg.
Okay.
And when I got out of Kellogg, I for sure knew I did not want to do a big corporate job. I'd been at Nike for 3 years. My summer internship had been at Disney in LA. And I was like, I want to do something entrepreneurial, or at least with a small company. Now, when I was at Kellogg, we did not have email. We did not use the internet. When you wanted to get a job, you went to an office, you took a binder off a shelf, and you flipped through paper of companies that had submitted opportunities. And I found this teeny little company in Cleveland, Ohio. So was I. And this company was a retail consulting firm. But they had been started by two people that worked for big consulting firms and had started this little one, and they wanted to open a branch in London. And I was going to come in and have this little apartment in Cleveland, but always be in London and be this jet setter. It would be fabulous. So I moved to Cleveland, and then everything changed, and they're like, you're not going to London, you're going to be in Cleveland, you're basically going to implement some kind of retail management software into these. I was like, oh no. This is not good. So I was in Cleveland for 8 months, 3 days, 7 hours, 10 minutes. But I had friends who were working at McKinsey from business school, and I read this article about these two McKinsey guys that were studying this new thing called selling on the internet. And I was like, wow, now this looks like something I would be interested in. So I called up my McKinsey friends, and they said, well, these two guys have written this article, but McKinsey is doing nothing in this space. This is 1995, right? And so one of them said, you should call this guy Steve. He's got 5 or 6 consultants that are recently out of HBS who are doing some consulting to America Online. Now, this is when America Online was sending everyone a magazine with a CD in it. Mm-hmm. This is the dark ages, and AOL was booming, and the movies were coming out and everything. And so I said, hey, I really want to do this. So I quit my job in Cleveland, I moved to DC, took a massive pay cut, started being a consultant at AOL with this group of people. And we realized pretty quickly, Bain, Booz, McKinsey, all these guys, none of them were consulting in this space. And we had spent 2 years consulting to AOL. So there were 3 of us that were in this company, kind of the principals. And another woman and I were like, let's move to New York. Let's open a fancy office at 55th and Madison, and let's charge $700 an hour.
Oh, wow.
And people were like, we'll pay you $8. Fantastic. So we moved, we opened this office, because they're used to paying McKinsey rates, for a partner, 1,500, whatever, and none of the McKinsey people could tell them anything about the internet. So we were like 5 minutes ahead of everyone, and we built up this company, and then there was a big consolidation in the industry of firms that had web-based businesses, like designing websites, doing back-end, front-end consulting, Viant, Scient, these other companies. Our company was this horribly named company called AppNet. No one thought it was sexy. Viant and Scient both went like this, then went like this. AppNet kind of took along, and then we were bought by Commerce One. They went in IPO, and so I went through this opening the company, selling the company did an IPO, company got acquired. It was Christmas 2000, and I was like, I'm out. We were already starting to come down, so I quit Christmas Eve of 2000 and said, I'm gonna go travel. And off I went.
Okay. And how long did you go and travel for?
I came back on September 8th, 2001.
Okay.
3 days later, things kind of shut down quite a bit there. So I was literally in Pakistan, traveling on my own as a woman, down the Karakoram into Gilgit, all the way down to Karachi in July of 2001. And then I flew back to New York in September on the 8th, and then September 11th happened. I was like, okay, we're clearly not going to be finding a job now.
Mm-hmm.
So I did the only smart thing you could think of. I went to New Zealand for 2 months.
Oh, okay.
And I traveled around. And when I came back, I was like, I really want to start my own thing.
Okay, so, and that's when you founded Economic Development Imports,
Exactly.
which is basically a fair trade business sourcing goods made by women living in Africa.
Yes.
So is this something, this is a passion that you wanted to pursue?
So I'd been all over the world, not all over, but many places, traveling on this journey, and I had been working in the internet space, and I had seen how the internet could bring worlds together that previously there was digital cameras and email fundamentally changed the way somebody in a place like Rwanda could have their product noticed in a place like New York, right? So I really wanted to find a company that was doing something like this and join that company. This didn't exist, so I was like, okay, I guess I have to start it myself. So I started this company, Economic Development Imports, with the idea that business was going to be the path toward development. And I also found this organization in New York called the Business Council for Peace, and I'm a board member of this organization. And the whole purpose of this organization is to go to areas of conflict and post-conflict and help businesses grow so people have jobs instead of fighting as an option. So we were doing work in Rwanda, Afghanistan, and I can't think of the third place now. Oh my gosh. Anyway, but because of that, I went to Rwanda and started this business, and I tried to build it up for about 4 years.
Okay, and then it went into a partnership with One World Projects.
So One World Projects, I'd never been on all my travels. I had never gone to Africa, but I decided let's start a company that works with Africa. What the heck, right? So I had gone to Rwanda. And people were telling me that there was this trade agreement that's similar to NAFTA, but for Africa. And I knew nothing about this, but there was a conference in DC that was talking about this African trade agreement. So I was like, all right, I live in New York, I'll cruise down to DC, I'll stay with some friends. I went to this conference. I'm like, yeah, I want to import product from Africa, I don't really know what I'm doing. They're like, you should talk to this guy, Phil. He's been importing from everywhere else in the world, Latin America and Asia, for a long time, One World Project. So Phil and I had lunch. After lunch, we formed a partnership by shaking hands. And for the next 4 years, we worked together. Because he had a warehouse upstate, he knew about importing. I was much more of I had the MBA, I knew how to scale the business. I had no idea about how to import anything. You're not gonna put a warehouse in Manhattan. He was in the middle of nowhere. So we just started working together, just over this random conference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well. So after economic development imports,
Yep.
And prior to joining Indiegogo, you spent 4 years at Etsy.
Yep, everything is 4 years.
Good. I think that's a good amount of time at any company. You spent 4 years at Etsy, which is an e-commerce website that focused on handmade goods and vintage items. Last year, the site had about 30 million registered users, projections of 1 million sellers, and over $1 billion in total annual transactions.
1.3 billion.
Okay.
And if you
Wow.
guys don't know Etsy, you should find it for your girlfriends and moms, because they all know.
So could you just explain, please, your role there?
Sure, so I joined Etsy when it was about 60 people to help them build their international business as well.
Okay.
And I left, so when I joined, Etsy was doing about 80 million a year in sales, 80, and had 60 people. And when I left 4 years later, we were doing 880 million in sales and had 400 people. So it was a huge rocket ship, and it's a marketplace. It's like eBay for handmade goods, right? So there's buyers, there's sellers, they're transacting, and it was like, you know, all my internet experience plus being an importer, working with individuals. It's all about letting individuals make their own living, do their own businesses on a small scale. And even though a lot of the women, it's mostly women who provide products on Etsy. Women make jewelry and clothing and all these things. There's not all women, there's many men who do this too, but primarily women. And these women might have been like in the US or in Western Europe or in developed countries, but you know, like when we had this big recession in 2008 and many people lost their jobs, these are the people that like kept the income going in the families. So they started making jams, or they, you know, made clothes, or they did other things while the other people who had lost their jobs were out looking for work. These guys had their own small businesses going. And it was just a really, I've always wanted to do something where you're like helping people become entrepreneurs or be able to be entrepreneurs through whatever the network is. And Etsy was a really cool place to do it.
Okay. Okay, so then you went on to Indiegogo.
Yeah.
Yay. Okay. Can you explain more, please, for if anyone doesn't know what Indiegogo
Sure.
is, what it is, and what do you do exactly?
So Indiegogo is a platform for crowdfunding. The idea of crowdfunding is you have an idea that's there in the world, and there is a group of people out there somewhere who might also like your idea, and they are willing to back you for that idea. And the crowdfunding has a couple different types. There's equity-based crowdfunding, where someone gives you X amount of dollars or euros or pounds or whatever, and you give them a share of equity in your company, some percent of your company. That's equity crowdfunding. Indiegogo does reward-based crowdfunding. So I say, hey, I have this amazing idea to make this film, or I have this really cool tech gadget, or I want to help this charity and I'm raising funds for that. You give me some money, I will give you back a pat on the back, a thank you, a gadget, whatever it is that I've promised for the different levels of price, I give back to you. So what Indiegogo does is we provide a platform to help all the people with ideas reach the amazing crowd of people that might support those ideas. So it's also a marketplace, the way Etsy is a marketplace. But the thing that's so cool about this is there's many, you know, when I was in Rwanda and in Kenya and Ethiopia and all over Africa and traveling through Asia, even people who are considered poor have cash. Everyone has money in their pockets except the very, very, very bottom of the pyramid. But there's a huge number, billions of people with some cash. And their village has cash, and their neighborhood has cash. But they can't access capital. They don't have any way to pull that together. The banks are extremely expensive for them to use, and there are too many hurdles for them to get into it. So when I think about crowdfunding, the thing that interested me isn't today with, like, you know, a bunch of tech guys in New York putting out cool gadgets and getting money for it. The thing that's interesting to me is the longer term thing. When everyone in Rwanda with a feature phone can share $10, $5 with other people in the community for that person to build something, then you have a flow of capital that could be trillions of dollars, and you're making a really big impact in helping people build businesses, change lives. To me, that's the like super exciting part. But my job today is to go to, we've got people in a few countries in Europe, we have people in Australia, we have people in Canada. Love to have somebody in this area who is basically telling people how to do crowdfunding, helping people be successful, helping these businesses get off the ground. And my job is to make that happen and also figure out like, how do you hire people in these countries, and what are the tax implications, and how many people do you need, and when's the right time to go to China? If anyone knows that, talk to me later. All of these things are part of my job. It's a very, very cool job. It's fun.
In terms of it being reward-based, have
Yes.
you ever thought of making it also in terms of investment platform, or not like combining it?
So yeah, that's a good question. So our founder is a guy named Slava Rubin, and I don't know if any of you have had the chance to meet Slava, but he has gone to Washington many times as part of a coalition of people that say crowdfunding should be open to everybody. Equity crowdfunding, reward crowdfunding, all kinds. Today in America, in the US, only accredited investors, people who make more than $200,000 a year, who have a $500,000 liquid assets, etc., these people are allowed to participate in equity-based crowdfunding, and the average person is not, because the unsophisticated investor will get taken advantage of, or there's rules that are trying to protect the unsophisticated investor. Now we sort of laugh because the unsophisticated investor is allowed to invest in WorldCom and Enron and many other companies that are out there. They're also allowed to go to Vegas, bet on the track, spend their money all kinds of ways, but they're not quite sophisticated enough to go and find a startup and back it with equity. So the Jobs Act, which was passed because the Securities Act of 1933 was slightly out of date. You've got a company like Facebook that had thousands of employees that are shareholders. And the Securities Act was like, if you have over 500 employees that are shareholders, you need to provide information as though you were a public company. And that didn't make sense for today's world of internet companies that have a lot of shareholders. So the Jobs Act started to chip away at some of these rules, and crowdfunding became the third level of the Jobs Act. And it hasn't passed yet in the US. If and when it finally gets through Congress, we'll see. I think Indiegogo could potentially, we are definitely interested in the equity space. However, equity crowdfunding, the rules, the legislation, the laws, every country is totally different. In rewards-based crowdfunding, we can be a totally global, open platform where people from all over the world can use the same set of rules. In equity crowdfunding, we would have to go country by country, and we don't know what the rules will be. So my guess is that someday Indiegogo will play in this space, but it's when and how, would it all be on the same platform? All those things are kind of going to depend on how the industry shapes up.
Okay. In terms of campaigns launched outside the US, what's going on outside of the US? How many campaigns, or what's the percentage?
Sure.
And is there also crowdfunding consultants popping up all over the world?
Yes, it's a very good job, by the way. So for your first question about percent, so Indiegogo basically started the crowdfunding industry in 2008. Slava, Danae, and another gentleman, Eric, put this idea together. And since 2008 till today, more than 200,000 campaigns have run on Indiegogo. Approximately a third of those are outside the US. So about a third of the transactions that happen are outside the US. Campaigners and contributors, and both campaigners and contributors. So every country, 224 countries and territories around the world have launched campaigns on Indiegogo. People from about 70 different countries every day contribute to campaigns on Indiegogo. So we are by far, the most global platform and the largest platform in terms of total number of campaigns, and before you ask, we don't release our top line numbers, so I can't tell you how much has been raised, but we distribute to campaign owners millions, with an S, of dollars every week. So it's big. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of Palestine, when were we brought, like when did we join, like in terms of?
That's an excellent question that I probably should have looked up. I knew a little more of it.
No, it's okay.
But you know what? You know what I'll do is, if you go to Indiegogo and you hit the Explore button,
Okay.
it takes you to a page where you can do all kinds of different searches. There's a drop-down box. You can put in Palestine, and it'll show the campaigns that have launched from there.
Mhm.
And so we can look at those, and then we can see.
Okay.
But there are several campaigns. Generally, they're a little bit small, and I'll tell you what, when I started thinking about my job here, I thought about crowdfunding is in the beginning of its lifespan. E-commerce has been around maybe 20 years, approximately, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when e-commerce started, it was mostly in the US, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it became more popular in Western Europe and in places that are English-speaking places that use credit cards, right? Because
Right.
this is how things are funded. So, you know, there may be a huge number of people on Twitter in Brazil, but people shopping in Brazil is far, far less because it's not a typical use of credit card place. It's very hard to import and export out of Brazil. So when you think about crowdfunding, I'm sort of like, where the hottest market's going to be early on, it's going to follow a pretty similar pattern to what you see in commerce. So I said, okay, we're big and strong in the US. Where else will it be? Probably the UK, Canada, and Australia, then Western Europe. Then it's going, you know, eventually, just like e-commerce, there'll be way more business outside the US than inside the US. But at the beginning, you know, a place like here where you have many fewer people, forget about everything else, fewer entrepreneurs, fewer people with using credit cards, shopping online, all those things, you're not going to have the volume of transaction that you would in other markets today. And that's another reason we went to Israel, because it punches way above its weight in terms of entrepreneurship and very high English-speaking population and very well connected already to the US. So they're already doing a lot of commerce back and forth, individual people as well as companies. So from a regional perspective, if I look at Dubai, or I look at other markets that you think might be big, there's still very tiny amounts of transactions happening regionally compared to, say, Germany or, you know,
Okay.
Canada or whatever. Yeah. So, but it will come over time, and it's just a matter of developing people like yourselves to know about crowdfunding, to use Indiegogo, to get things started. And the benefit that you have is, like, you get to reach the whole rest of the world, right? I mean, that's why people launch on Indiegogo. They might be, you know, a Croatian company that has very little home country traction, but they can put their project out there and reach everyone in Europe, reach the US, reach Canada, etc.
Any like inside tips for anybody who wants to start a project on Indiegogo, for anybody in the room?
Yes.
Like some,
Yeah.
any advice, like if anyone here who has used it or hasn't, anything that you would recommend that they should do? Like
Yes,
in terms
sure.
of.
So there's a couple things. One is, whatever platform you use, and of course you should use Indiegogo, because it's the easiest and the biggest and the friendliest. But any platform you use, I don't care which one it is, you have to bring the first group of people. You have to build a snowball. Snowballs don't magically appear in any climate. Snowballs do not magically appear. If you want to raise $100,000, we as a rule of thumb say you need to bring the first third. You need to know $30,000 worth of people who will fund your idea. If you don't, maybe you only know 10,000, maybe your goal should be 30. And the reason I say that is because when you have an idea out there and your closest circle of people fund it, and then they share it, it starts to get some momentum. And when you have a little bit of momentum, then the press is interested. Then strangers become interested. If you walk by a restaurant with a famous chef and no people eating in it, and next door is a falafel house, that's packed around the door, where are you going to eat? You're going to eat where all the people are, right? People are going to talk about the amazing falafel house. They're going to say, I don't know why nobody eats in this restaurant. So if you set this huge goal and you only have 10% funded, people will come. You might get huge traffic to your page. We have 9 million page views a month from you. 9 million unique visitors a month. You might have huge traffic, but people are going to say, nobody really likes this idea, or not enough people trust this guy to move it forward, or whatever. So the first and most important tip is you need to be able to bring that first 30%. The second tip is, it is completely not true that if you don't have a big goal, people don't take you serious. You can have a goal of 10,000 and it will be 300,000 later. People will overfund like crazy. They're like, oh my gosh, I have to get in on this. This is amazing, right? So that would be the first most important tip. The second most important tip is to Google Indiegogo Field Guide and download this. And I will send you all this information. But the Field Guide, basically, we've run 200,000 campaigns. We know, on average, if you put a video in your campaign, you're going to raise 114% more money. We know if you send at least 4 updates, you will raise 339% more money on average, because we have all this data that we have crunched, and we can tell you exactly when you should be sending out an email, how you should get that first 30%. You guys know your businesses better than we do, but we know how to do crowdfunding probably better than you do, because we've done 200,000 campaigns and you have done 0. So my advice is, really think about who you're going to bring in, and then we can really help you think about how to craft your message, how to think about your perks, how to reach out to other people that might be helpful to you. And once you do that, we have an algorithm on the web, on Indiegogo, called the Go-Go Factor. This is just like Google PageRank or any other algorithm that determines who gets to be at the top of the page and who is on the 9th page, right? And so this algorithm measures shares, likes, visits, contributions, all the different active updates, whatever goes on the page. If your goal is 1,000 or your goal is 1 million, you can still get onto the home page of Indiegogo, because the Go-Go Factor is a relative scale based on all these things. And if you read the field guide, and if you talk to consultants at Indiegogo who are happy to help you, your Go-Go Factor will go up, and you will get, once you bring that 30% and your Go-Go Factor starts to spin up, then I say, wow, you have this amazing tech campaign. I know they will love that in Berlin, and I call my PR agency in Berlin. If you don't get to that 30–40%, I never even find your campaign. I don't make that phone call, right? The Go-Go Factor is what drives it forward, and that's all based on the work that you do.
Is Indiegogo worried about fraudulent campaigns? Basically, one of my colleagues yesterday mentioned Sensibo, I think, and this amazing video that's coming out of Tel Aviv and this product, and we watched it yesterday, and he was just like, but here you are putting all this money in this campaign, but it doesn't even look like it's something even workable, and what if, it's a fraud? They take all your money and they're like, good luck, and the product doesn't work.
Yeah, so people ask me this all the time. I have yet to find one campaign like this, ever, and I'll tell you why. The first is the reason I just said to you. You have to tell every single person you know, all your friends, all your family, everyone in your network to come fund you. Okay, these are the last people in the world that you're going to take their money and run to the Caymans. You're going to not do that. It's insane. It's your whole social capital. So people who they don't get to that first 30% unless they use that social capital. So that's one. 2, the crowd is the smartest person out there. The crowd will see, nobody knows this guy. He doesn't have any background in engineering. He doesn't have any friends on Facebook. He's not, all this information, it's like when you rent an Airbnb. Mm-hmm. You look at this picture, but then you see, well, what did other people say? And, does this guy have a social profile? And so there's all that going on. Also, if it says, Nigerian prince making an amazing, most people will sort of see through this, right? We have fraud algorithms. We also have the backbone of the credit card industry and PayPal. And you can be sure that their fraud algorithms that are running on top of our algorithms are seeing everything, right? Like if all of a sudden, this is what sometimes happens to legitimate people, right? You have a campaign, it's awesome. You just opened your first PayPal account a month ago for your company. 4 days into your campaign, $200,000 comes in. PayPal's like, whoa, who's this guy? Like this is out of nowhere, right? So immediately flags go up, people see things, and we're like, hey, he's an Indiegogo guy, we know him, So there are a lot of checks and balances out there, and of course we have actual human beings on our team that also look for things. But the things that human beings find are much more like honest mistakes, like you're not allowed to run a raffle. We have terms of service that are things like that, and people might put that up. Or a woman in Canada had a reward, a perk, we call them, to travel to Cuba. Well, the U.S. doesn't have relations with Cuba, so we're not allowed to have that perk, right? So we were like, yo, you have to take that down. So our team, she's like, but I'm from Canada. I'm like, yes, but we're from America. So, we have certain things like that, but very, very rarely will you find someone, we had a very controversial campaign recently called the Heal Bee campaign. This campaign raised over $1 million. This guy on, not Engadget, but another, it'll come to me. Anyway, he wrote scathing article day after day after day after day about how Indiegogo is defrauding people and all this and that. Because we had a campaign where a guy created a glucose meter to measure your blood glucose level without piercing your skin. People said this is not possible, this is crazy. He raised $1 million. And we, as Indiegogo, said, look, we are not here to judge whether or not this will work. We're here to know that we've met this guy, he's putting up his name, his science, his demonstrations, he's willing to talk to anyone. If you don't think it's a real campaign, don't fund it. We're not the gatekeeper, right? Like there was a time when no one believed that the earth traveled around the sun, right? The Wright brothers said we're gonna put a machine in the air that flies. People said that's crazy, right? So all the time we'll hear chirping from people, this isn't right, you guys are taking advantage of people. We're like, look, we're the platform. This guy checks out, he's an honest person. Whether or not this works, we don't know. You don't know. If you don't think so, don't put your money there, right? So for us, we just really stand by being completely open. We take chances on products that most people are afraid to take. We do health things. We do sex toys. You name it, we have it on Indiegogo, because to us, that's really about meaning that you're open and you're willing to support the crowd. And if some people like it, great. If other people don't like it, that's okay.
One last question on Indiegogo.
Yeah.
Can you tell us one of the coolest projects that was funded by Indiegogo, and maybe one of the weirdest from your point of view?
Okay. So I was telling some people earlier about this kid who wants to clean up the ocean cleanup project, which I thought was a very, very cool project, because he's a young kid who has this idea to get all that trash that's floating in the ocean cleaned up. And he's 18, and he made a TEDx video talking about his vision. He was so passionate and so smart, and he wanted to raise money to do a little bit more research. And he raised $80,000 to do more research, and he just presented last week in New York, and I missed it because I was here, but I'm not complaining. It's great to be here. So that one was very cool. One of my favorite campaigns, though, is this guy in Australia who wanted to make a movie called Me and My Mates and the Zombie Apocalypse. It'd be a hugely successful film. And an apocalypse implies many zombies. This is not the one zombie, this is many zombies. So he wanted to make this film, and he'd made films in the past, and he was pretty sure he could get people behind it. But he raised some money to start filming, whatever. And he decided he needed $35,000 to hire a makeup company that really does amazing zombie work. I can show you some pictures. Amazing. So he's like, okay, $35,000 for zombie makeup. How am I gonna get this done? So he got his friends. He said, okay, listen, if you give me $5, I'll say thank you. If you give me $20, I'll give you, you could come to the screening, blah, blah, blah. He said, for $200, you can be in my movie and made up like a zombie. People were like, fantastic. I want to be a zombie. Like, people like you guys who have real jobs. Like, I could be a zombie for $200? He's like, for $1,000, I will kill you on screen. He sold 5 of those. So not only did he make $40,000 on his campaign, he got the actors to pay him to be in the movie. This is fantastic. And then he was like, you know what? I could use some more zombies. So he ran a second campaign, sold 5 more 1,000 zombie perks, right? And I think that, it's a fun story to tell because it's zombies. Who doesn't love zombies? But the thing is like, in addition to being amazingly creative, and like, there are app developers who are getting people to pay them to be a beta tester. Really? Okay. But the thing that is really cool is like, some people fund a campaign because they want the thing. Some people fund a campaign because, they're in the job they have now, but they wanted to be in a band, they wanted to be an actor, they want to support the independent artists, they want to see, the kids. There's a campaign running from here right now by a woman. We should pull it, we should tell everyone about this. She's got cerebral palsy herself. She's teaching disabled kids here in Palestine who would otherwise have no school to go to. And she's raised 30 grand or something, some of it off direct to her and some through Indiegogo. Because she is like, it is wrong that disabled kids don't get to have an education. And she's appealing to people all over the world, and this shows up on Indiegogo, and somebody who lives, in France, in the US, in Australia says, my gosh, this woman is amazing. Like, of course I'll give her $10, $15, $100, whatever, some amount. Because some people just want to like be part of other people doing great work, right? And so it's sometimes for the thing, but it's much more often to be part of the community. To be like, hey, I get to tell my friends that I'm in this movie. And the best thing is for the movie maker, you can be sure that everyone who paid has told everyone they know, and everyone's going to watch this movie, right? Because they're passionate fans. But I think that's the thing that's really cool is all these different projects appeal to people for really different reasons. And you might be a tech guy and have come to Indiegogo to hit to support Sensible because you think it's super cool and you want to be able to control your air conditioning and all this stuff. And the video was funny.
Oh yeah. I would support it on the video.
Yeah, the video alone, right? Like, but at the same time, you might say, oh yeah, even though I'm a tech geek, I also happen to play the guitar, and here's this amazing band, right? Like, so people find things. Like, very few people have only one dimension to their whole life, right? So there's a lot of reasons like that you cross-promote. And as for the consultants, you want to know about consultants? So Indiegogo takes 4%. Consultants, they take a much bigger percentage. So I highly recommend you go become a consultant. No, so consultants are popping up in the industry just like, people started doing fulfillment for eBay or, other types of projects, other types of things to support the ecosystem of crowdfunding. So a lot of people might have great idea, a super group of people who they know they're going to support them, but they have no idea how to make a good video. So they hire a video company. Or they might say, you know what, we can make the video, we have our first people, but we really need a PR agency to help amplify after the 30%, things like that. 99% of projects do not need a consultant. You could shoot the video with your phone, or your friend has a digital SLR, something like this. There's a lot of free software, inexpensive software to edit. Most people don't need consultants, but bigger campaigns that are trying to raise millions of dollars, they often will bring in people. And one of the most popular consulting areas is people who are extremely good at social media. People know how to get you picked up on Facebook, on Twitter, on other places. So we know a lot of those folks, and we try to match people up if they ask us to do it. But for the most part, most people just run their campaigns on their own and through their own network of friends and things like that.
Okay. I'm going to just ask a couple of short questions in terms of entrepreneurial advice, because I usually don't.
Yeah.
We got some feedback. So I just wanted to ask, what popular entrepreneurial advice do you tend to disagree with?
I was thinking about this kind of a question, and the things that I guess that I don't, that I tend to disagree with. I mean, there's a big debate like, are you born as an entrepreneur? Can you learn to become an entrepreneur? Like, first of all, okay, here's the thing that gets me. This is the thing. You don't have to start your own company to be an entrepreneur. You can be working inside a big company and be the one guy that's going to move that company in a new direction. Being an entrepreneur means being passionate about something, going against the common thinking, trying something on your own. And it doesn't always have to, the last thing I wanted to do was start my own company, but I couldn't find another company, so like I ended up doing that. But I love working at Indiegogo. It's not my company, I didn't start it, but I feel like I have an extraordinarily entrepreneurial job. I travel all around the world trying to figure out where to like insert ourselves so that we can help build an ecosystem, meet new people, help them bring their projects forward. So I think being entrepreneurial is a mindset more than a job title.
Okay, and what, looking back, what's one thing you wish you understood about entrepreneurship before you ever got started?
I think it's better not to know. It's like, you know, I think for me, I never have worried about like what's going to be the next job. Like if this doesn't, like what if it doesn't work out at Indiegogo? Like what's going to happen? You know, I think people tend to say like, you know, in the US, being a failed entrepreneur is like gold. Like people think you're a genius because you're a failed entrepreneur. Like in the US, it's very acceptable. In fact, it's like you should be one. You know, like you haven't lived until you're a failed entrepreneur. And most of the rest of the world, this is not the expectation. You know, people say you took this risk and you failed. Like that's really bad. Like that looks bad on your resume. This is very much a cultural difference between the U.S. and most of the rest of the world. Even in Western Europe, being a failed entrepreneur is not considered a badge of honor. Right. And so I think that's where like the fact that you guys are willing to try something in places that are not so accepting, particularly women, frankly, this is amazing. And you should be very proud and not let people discourage you about like, well, this is failed. Like every failure leads to a much bigger, incredible success. My company failed, I had to shut it down. It was an unintentional nonprofit.
Two more questions. What's your most memorable experience as an entrepreneur?
Okay, I think probably the most memorable experience is when I started economic development imports. I started in Rwanda. And the goal was to bring people from the Hutu and Tutsi tribes together. This is, you know, heady stuff, right? And making these baskets that we call the peace basket. That they've been weaving these baskets forever, but we added a little bit of different color and a few things. And we started with 50 women at the beginning of the year. By the end of the year, we had 450 women. And we decided to host a, like sort of a thank you reception, for lack of a better word. And we invited the Minister of Commerce, the Minister of Gender, you know, a bunch of dignitaries. These women had never been to the capital city. These dignitaries came, and out of these 450 women, there was about 10 or 12 groups, and each group has a president that organizes the women, gathers the baskets, receives the money, doles out the money, this kind of thing. And we wanted to give them some gifts. So I bought 24 goats, and I gave each woman a boy goat and a girl goat, each president, and I handed out these goats, and the first baby goat needed to go to somebody else in the tribe, you know, in their group. And these women, who don't speak a word of English, stood up and acted out a play, a 10-minute play, about how this project had completely changed their lives. Like they're paying their school fees, they're buying medicines, you know, their husbands are like, yeah, go to work, bring home all this money. And it was like amazing transformation. You know, like this is like much more interesting to me than getting a loose site for selling a company. You know, like this is changes people's lives. I don't even speak this language, right? But they, you know, here I am handing out goats in Rwanda. Like, it's absurd, right? But it was amazing. And now, the two people I partnered with in Rwanda, these two sisters who were like my moms, right? Amazing women, who came, but they fled to Uganda during the genocide and came back specifically to rebuild their country. These two women now employ over 2,000 women, starting with this 50, who make products that sell in Macy's and other places. So this company that I started, even though I don't do it anymore, you know, because I couldn't quite make my own living, even though we were helping these guys make a living, we were able to leverage that into this now thriving business. And one of these presidents, who didn't speak a word of English and had zero money, she has 2 kids in private school in Uganda from this. This is now 10 years of later. So I think that is my most interesting and exciting moment as being an entrepreneur. And this, right? Right after the goats. Well, actually, this is really cool.
And last question, if you could offer a first-time entrepreneur only one piece of advice, what would it be?
Just, there's never going to be a better, easier, more XYZ time. Like, do it today. Like, it doesn't get, you know, things get easier, but like your life's never going to get less complicated. The timing's never going to get better. Like, just go for it, and don't worry about if it doesn't work out. What happens next? Something always happens next. So that's what I try to tell them.
Great, thank you. That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? Since I asked so many.
Yes.
You can reflect on how, as it relates to startups getting funded on crowdfunding platform, what's the reaction of VCs to that? The second thing is, I guess it's sort of a comment and a question. When you say if you are making an analogy between e-commerce and crowdfunding,
Yes.
I think there's an important but subtle difference that in terms of products and the ability of the sell side, yes, in the case of e-commerce, it was much more advanced in Western world, let's say, America, Western Europe, and so on. But in the case of crowdfunded projects, you never know what you'll discover once you enable some backwater.
I think the other thing about crowdfunding, first of all, because commerce has moved 20 years ahead, and because we're getting digital currency and all these things, the timeline would be, you know, what we're going to see is more people. I mean, people fundamentally, they're like, that's cool, I want that, right? Like, so there's less and less of a border in that about stuff that never has to be shipped, that is like supporting an idea, a concept, a downloadable thing. So crowdfunding, I think, will go very, very, very quickly. I think the early days of the people contributing to those projects will be from the places you quote unquote expect. A sort of sexy speaker that you put on a shelf. And of course it had like, you know, it was all connected to your app, like someone opened a window, the kid is crying, whatever, all this stuff. And they went to VCs, to folks who were like, no, we're only going to give you 10% of equity, not 40, whatever it was. And so Canary went on to Indiegogo, and in the middle of the campaign, the VCs tried to wire the money into Canary's accounts, better terms, right? And so they ended up raising money in the end, but much, much better terms. And what we're seeing, they want to know if this team is actually able to market their products and find people who want them, all kinds of things, you know, etc. But in the present, when you're concentrating on something, you're doing some work, I'm giving this talk and I'm thinking, oh my God, did I into whatever it is you're doing? And if you were a soldier or a brain surgeon or a horse jockey or something where like you're doing some, train you to be like, for these 15 minutes, I am uber concentrated, which makes you amazingly effective. Whole, you know, 4-inch heels, the whole thing, she's like rocking it. People were like, this is a little out there for me. So she went on Indiegogo, she raised her science or her abilities or whatever, but it just was a little too far out for them, and you know, she didn't have this huge network of people that already knew her or whatever, and then she was able to prove. Slava likes to say, Slava, our CEO, likes to say that the president of Wells Fargo or Citibank or pick your bank.
In terms of the percentage that you take, 9%, 4%,
Not enough.
I know not enough, but why you don't make it also like flexible? Like you also said that your advice is to let your friends and family bring third, but then I'm gonna let them put this money, and then it's gonna be cut off 9%. Instead, I can take this money outside, and instead of doing that, I can like my aim would be to get outsiders money, because I can get my friends and family's money, and it's not always good. But then you can use, I tell you, like, if I raise this, please take this, and you can maybe do the marketing your own or something, like further expand.
I mean, a couple things. One is, the idea is that this is the beginning of your snowball, right? And that if you do things right, we're gonna help amplify your campaign so that that original amount is a tiny fraction of the total.
Yeah, but it's the amplifying is automated by the algorithm.
Yeah, but, right, and by us putting you like in our newsletter and in calling the PR agencies and all this other work. I think the thing is, like, very few people, like you're talking about your friends giving you $10. Are you gonna run all over town and get your friends to give you $10, $20, $100? And no investor's gonna give you this for zero equity, right? Like, we're not taking any equity whatsoever, and that 9% drops to 4% if you hit your goal. So 4% for us to run the platform and pay my extremely low salary, to pay all the people, have engineers, keep the site up 24 hours, have customer support. 4% is pretty good, given that you get to keep all of the money, you don't have to pay it back, you keep 100% of your equity. And then you have a lot more leverage to go out in the world and say, hey, investor, now I need 10 million and I'll give you 35% of the company, or whatever it is. So I think the fact that we offer 9% or down to 4%, I mean, no one else does that. Like, we're the only people that do that. And other platforms, 4%, I mean, most people don't make a decision on price, but you raise more money and keep more of that money on Indiegogo. So 4% for us, 5% for Kickstarter, 3% for PayPal, 4% for Amazon payments. So we're talking about 7 against 9 out of the gate. So if you raise $1 million, that's 2% off that million that we're going to keep in your pocket. Plus, we're going to help you raise, we believe, more money than you'll raise anywhere else. So it's a pretty good deal, I think.
It's a really good deal. I mean, if you look at brokerage, typically you're talking about 4% if somebody can broker money for you, and that's usually brokering money for equity.
Yeah.
So 4% is a fantastic number. I think the interesting part is you can take out PayPal's cut.
Well, if we could, it's very hard to take a PayPal's cut at this point. Like right now, I think, what are you going to put in Bitcoin? I was like, I'll put in Bitcoin when people actually use Bitcoin. Yes, those things will come over time, and everyone will be using digital money and all of that. But today, your friends and family are not going to go to your campaign with Bitcoin. They're going to go with their, Visa card, right? So.
And what's the future?
They're big. They're right here in my hometown. All this stuff is good, but they're much more closed. They don't have a vision to be everywhere in the world. They decide who will be on and who will not be on. Their thing from the get-go was a little bit more of a club, and and Indiegogo is like a big tribe. Like, everyone's in it, right? And I started this story as like I was adopted as a kid. Like, I was plucked out and dropped over here. Like, could have ended up anywhere, I got lucky, but so it's like all comers with Indiegogo, right? Like, we don't censor the projects. We don't tell you can or you can't do something. I mean, we have, a couple of rules. Like, you can't do guns and drugs and, things that are illegal. But for the most part, everywhere and everything, and for me, that's what's going to win. I mean, the open platform that the crowd decides, to me, is the long-term win. And that's why I'm obviously was very privileged to get this job, but that's why I went that direction, because it's, to me, the long-term play. It's an obvious thing.
Mo?
What more can we do in Palestine or India?
I mean, things like this where we get to come and talk. I mean, it would be fantastic if we had a few people of you guys who were, you know, friends of Indiegogo who, you know, learned a little bit more about our platform and could tell other people about, hey, you know, Indiegogo has people that will work with you. If you have an idea for this campaign, email Liz, she'll hook you up with the right, you know, I mean, we can't do it for every $1,000 campaign, but it also doesn't have to be a $1 million campaign. The woman who's doing the cerebral palsy education woman, I wish I knew the name, I'll look it up.
Hassoun something.
Yeah, Hassoun's kids. Yeah, Hassoun's kids. I saw that campaign. I mean, we get like a staff pick of the week. I told like everyone in the company, like, you got to tweet this out. We got to do that. This is amazing. You know, I need to know about these things, right? She got her 30%. She'd done her work, but I hadn't heard about it yet, right? And so, if we could have more advocates who are out there encouraging people to run campaigns, hosting nights like this, doing maker workshops, you know, we can do if you had 10 people who were in draft mode, that means like they've uploaded their video, they've started to fill things out, they've thought about their perks. We could say, you know what, we'll do a G-chat, Tuesday night, your time, morning in New York, bring these 10 people on, we'll review their campaigns live, we're more than happy to do stuff like that. The thing that is, like, the key for us is that they're like, they've gone from, I have this idea, to they put it onto the platform, because we can't really review it. It's hard for us to know how you're going to present things until it's there. But it costs nothing to put it on the platform. Like, it's free, right? So we'd be more than happy to do things like that. And for you to let us know, like, hey, you should reach out to this guy, he's got this super cool new digital writing, whatever, you know. And we'll reach out and try to help them. And they don't, I mean, this is a place where it's a little bit more difficult because, you know, PayPal's not here. So you do have to have a relationship with someone in anywhere in Europe or the US or the UK or whatever. I saw that downstairs. I'm thinking the trademark lawyers are going I saw PalPay. I was laughing. It was at a deli. Like, oh, this is perfect. But yeah, we would be more than happy to work with people. And, you know, we also tell people, like, you know what, you're not ready. Like, you don't have enough in your circle. You haven't thought through your idea. Like, this, the way you're presenting it doesn't make sense. Like, well, from New York, we're very direct.
Can I also follow on this question regarding the banking and the fact that payment doesn't exist, and then it's prohibiting to require somebody with a great idea, and let's say they have a fantastic campaign, to require having a friend in the US that they will count on, that they will ship them money. Is there a way, for example, Indiegogo can create a bank account that can be used to transfer money to another bank account or something?
No, unfortunately not. I mean, the thing that's amazing is, like, our friends in Brooklyn make you do that for every single campaign around the world that's not in one of 4 countries, right? It's amazing to me that people will take this effort. The thing is, because we are not a bank, we are not a financial institution, we're just a platform, we actually can't provide accounts or be the bank or do any of these things. So in this case, like, Masood has a friend, somebody, or herself.
She's American. She's
right,
American.
okay. So she's got the
She a
account.
comedian? She a comedian?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
so, okay.
Yes.
I was like, is it the same person? Okay, sorry.
So it is, I will grant you, it is more difficult here. This is not, you know, this is not a choice Indiegogo is making.
Yeah.
This is something we are facing.
Maybe
So-
we need to partner with a bank that would be interested to do it.
Yeah.
Rather than
Yeah.
Indiegogo.
I mean, or business, like, you know, eZone, for example, I'm just using this as an example. We have these things called partner pages. eZone could be a partner. eZone could say, okay, we're going to open this account in the UK, in the US, Tel Aviv, wherever. Then we will do all the payment process. Now, all the payments will be processed through the one eZone account, and then we will deal with spreading it out. So something like that could happen. Maybe there's where's the VC? Where'd Ohio go? You know, maybe the VC firm who's obviously got accounts in New York, whatever, would be willing to do something like this, right? So I think there's creative ways to do it, and we should do a partnership with you guys because any campaign that would be affiliated with you guys would get a 10% discount off our fees. So there you go.
Yay.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
You remember that, right?
I don't know. I'm like I can't remember what I had for lunch, but I'll do my best. Look, and honestly, like we're very, like I wasn't joking about the 400 emails. I'm very behind. But if you email me and you say like, hey, I really want to do this film campaign, or I really want to do this tech campaign or cause, whatever, we'll do our best to match you up. And the field guide, I really recommend. It's available in 6 languages. If somebody here would translate this into Arabic, I will put it up. Like, that would be fantastic. It's not in Hebrew either. We're trying to get it translated. We have it in German, French, English, Dutch, Spanish, and I think, and German. But it's basically the how-to of crowdfunding, and these are rules that are like for everybody. I mean, we obviously would like you to use Indiegogo, but it would be, I would like if somebody would be willing to do that, that would be amazing. Or help us start, and we use a company that we could then, the problem is we don't really have anyone to like let us know if it's good.
Okay.
So we would want it to be good, right? So you guys would be that would be something, be great for the community. So you can put it out, and on Indiegogo, the site is only available currently in 4 languages, but you can put whatever language you want in your pitch text. And we see people all the time put dual, try languages, not just Western characters, all kinds of things. The other thing we've seen people do is create, and this could be something you guys could create for people, like, here's a PDF of what checkout looks like, and put it in Arabic, and circle, here's the button you're gonna hit. And like we've had people do that in Mandarin, we've had people do that in Japanese, etc. So some of those things, if you wanna help the local community, that's a great way to do it. It's up to her.
Yeah, that's okay.
What do you see the future of crowdfunding in general, and your vision for Indiegogo? And also, what if the Job Act did not pass by the Congress?
So Congress will get there eventually. Enough people will leave and new people will come in. I think that this is coming, right? Like the fact that the Job Act exists at all is because things have been changing so much. There will be more and more and more crowdfunding, debt, peer-to-peer, equity, reward, hybrids. It's all coming. Like 30 years ago, people on trading floors ran around with slips of paper. Like none of those people are running anywhere anymore, right? Like money comes out of machines that we put cards into. Like I could go down the street here and my card will work if Cirrus is in the network, right? And so we're just going to see more and more and more of this coming. And I think we're going to see it in, the Rwandas of the world, in villages where people will be able to support each other's projects. And there's a lot of money floating around in that village. And they'll be able to consolidate it in a way that's very, very, very low to no cost. And microfinance works because 8 people get together and check on each other. Crowdfunding is like that, where everyone can see it on Facebook too, And so there will be more people who are willing to trust and support and engage. So I think we're at the infancy, and we have no, it's a little bit like when we had green and black on the screen, and now we have like motion video.
If we left the legislation aside, like, do you think equity and crowdfunding or reward crowdfunding would make more money? The second question, like, in countries that do not use credit cards, do you raise any money, or is it 0%?
I mean, there's no country where everyone doesn't have like some people have cards, right? But right now, we don't have really alternatives.
Like, for example, eZone, if we want to fund, we can send the money to eZone, which have a bank account and can send the money to the States. For example, if I don't have a credit card, I can still fund
Yes,
projects.
yes,
and-
right.
and
But,
they're-
I mean, you're making a big effort to do so, right? Your average person isn't quite ready to do that yet, which is why most of the funding, most of the contributions are coming from places where, I mean, where e-commerce is more common. But that's gonna change. I mean, this is just the early days here, right? And I think from a marketing perspective, if you're a tiny company in here, and you're like, okay, I can market to the US, Canada, Australia, and the UK, or here, you're gonna say, like, okay, I'm gonna get most of my money from all of these other, I'm not gonna not market here, but I mean, that, you know, it's just much bigger. As for, you wanted to know something else
Like
about.
equity or-
Oh, equity and reward, okay. So this is how I like to think about this. 95% of small businesses will never raise capital from investors. 2/3 of the stuff on Indiegogo is creative projects, nonprofits, you know. Vast majority, the long tail will never need equity. Big, huge, enormous mega projects will need equity. And so there will be many dollars on both sides. But like the total value of NASDAQ versus every business in the country, right? Like these are the things that you're comparing, right? So I think reward will go on forever. I think peer-to-peer loans will become enormous, right? I think there's just massive dollars everywhere and at different levels and at different risk levels, right? If I put $100 to this campaign and I get my Sensibo and I didn't, you know, maybe I don't love it as much as I thought, like I can still pay the bills, right? If I poured all my money into a tech company and it goes defunct, then, you know, so
What kind of campaigns do
woman at all. It was like, this is outrageous. Let's raise some money so she can like quit her job, have some peace. He raised $859,000 for Karen Klein. Disney flew her and 10 friends to like Disney to have a vacation. You know, this went nuts because people were like, this is outrageous. Bullying has to stop. This, you know, that kind of thing, right? And so, you know, no, you wouldn't have guessed that would be it. And it's the same, you know, I was talking to someone earlier about an origami, a giant life-size elephant origami. It takes 40 people just to make the first fold because the paper is so big. Guy raised like $25,000 to make a big paper elephant. You know, so you never know.
Maybe you should leverage Indiegogo for justice in Palestine and buy some super PACs in the US.
Well, you know, it was funny because there was a super PAC, you know, the guy on TV, Steve Colbert. He was like, you know, I mean, it was a joke thing, right? Like, but like someone else, Arsenio Hall, put up $1 billion campaign to buy the Clippers, you know, because of the whole like race thing. Like that's not a serious campaign, but he's like, any money we raise, we're going to donate to a charity that's like race relations or whatever. You know, so people do things like that. It's more like for fun. They're not really expecting $1 billion to be raised, although we'd be thrilled.
Steve Ballmer.
Yeah, well, he didn't buy it through us. We're not getting 4%. Anyway, so we should.
Yeah,
So let's
that's
go.
great.
But thank you
Yes,
so much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, it's actually, it's at 3, but, yeah. And the U transaction on PayPal is 3%. If it's Palestine to France, it's more like 4%.